New Orleans. That one place where the Princess and the Frog took place, right? Don't go. I'm so sorry. The Big Easy, NOLA, whatever you want to call it, this hub of culture is one that is unmatched by other cities in the US of A. This is due in part to the cultural influences that this city has had over its lifespan, such as Spanish, French, and West African notes. The town itself has also garnished a reputation with the occult. Strange happenings seem to be attracted to this city, and one that I want to go over today is something that we're all familiar with. Vampires. Hold on. Let me set the mood before we continue. Much better. Vampires have had a long history within Louisiana and specifically New Orleans. So much so that their culture is still being influenced today by the legends of the darkness and the night. In this video, I'm going to go over 3 prominent vampire legends from the region and how New Orleans became the vampire capital of the USA. My name is HugoIsHorrible and welcome to Vampires of New Orleans. Legends, mythos, and culture. Our first legend here is one of the Casket Girls. The story starts with a French colonizer known as Pierre Lemonnier d'Iberville. In 1699, he and his gang of French-Canadian cronies founded the colony and began claiming it for the Kingdom of France. As they were developing the colonies, Pierre pleaded with the French government to send over what would be called in simple terms, French baddies. They were to arrive and be married off to the colonists in order to help the men become rooted within the land and have an interest in developing it. This was actually the backup plan because many of the colonists were known as coureurs de bois, which roughly translates to runner of the woods. These men were essentially woodsmen who would engage in fur trade with the indigenous population. The original plan was for the men to establish the stolen colonies and to engage romantically with the native women. However, in an almost poetic turn of events, the women resisted the French way of living and actually converted the men into following their native customs. If only history followed these wonderful women's example, we'd be living in an entirely different society, but I digress. Obviously, the French weren't very keen on this, so sending women to the colony became a top priority. In the years to come, the French began a campaign to get women to come over to the colony. While some of the women that were transported came of their own free will with the promise of bountiful and friendly lands, many of them were transported against it. It wouldn't be uncommon to find ships filled with women of the night, murderers, thieves, and deportees. However, the colony of Louisiana wasn't all that it seemed to be. At the time that the women arrived, they learned the truth of the New World. There was little to no livestock or vegetation, there was little to no housing other than primitive huts, and most importantly, there was no civilization. The women that survived the voyage to the New World were met with an even greater challenge: surviving it, many of which didn't. One of the group of girls that were transported to Louisiana were known as Casket Girls. These girls are credited as the original bringer of vampires. Here is their legend. On January 8, 1721, a group of girls boarded the ship La Baleine headed for the newly found colony of Louisiana. These girls carried with them small suitcases known as cassets, or otherwise known as caskets. These were filled to the brim with dowries that were to be given to the groom at the time of marriage. Many of the girls that traveled were handpicked from La Salpêtrière. This was a hospital in France for the orphaned, imprisoned, and mentally insane. Alongside them was one of the nuns who worked at La Salpêtrière, known as Sister Gertrude. Sister Gertrude was tasked with keeping the girls pure throughout their voyage and did so quite erratically. She would keep the girls under lock and key during the hours of the night in order to complete her mission. What the girls didn't know is that Sister Gertrude had an alternative task that had been given to her. She was tasked to dispose of a very dangerous patient from La Salpêtrière, a vampire. You see, La Salpêtrière wasn't just a hospice for the needy, but also a prison for the unknown, diabolical, unholy creatures who the church deemed unfit to be around civilians. The thing about Sister Gertrude is that she was jealous of the girls. She envied the attention that the girls received on the deck by the other shipmates. It's said that she made a deal with the unholy creature, the exact details of which are unknown. All that is known is the rumors of one of the damned souls on board and the fates that were to come from it. The rumors say that the girls saw a small black cat enter into the room just before they went dizzy. After the cat, a dark figure came in and a sudden faintness overcame them. Daybreak came as nightfall went, and the lovely maidens were nowhere to be seen on the deck. Were they now maidens of the night, ruled through the influence of darkness? Once the ship landed in Louisiana, Sister Gertrude quickly wed off the girls to anyone in need of a bride. At night, of course. Once the last girl had wed, Sister Gertrude had hurried back to France with little to no consequence for the atrocities that only she bore witness to. The girls didn't land near New Orleans, but it's believed that that is where they were attracted to. They had accepted their new life and had a buffet of undesirables that no one would miss. Illness befell New Orleans apart from the hungry parasites that attached themselves to the dark underbelly of the city. This is when the Ursulines were sent there. The Ursulines were a sect of Roman Catholic nuns who operated a convent within France. The king sent them to Louisiana in order to care for the sick that had plagued the streets of the colony and to educate the deplorables in the holy ways. Alongside these nuns, Sister Gertrude was ordered by the king to join them. It's said that the king was made privy of the dealings that Sister Gertrude had made and sent her back in order to fix the mistake that she had created. However, when the ship left for its voyage, Sister Gertrude was nowhere to be found. One of the nuns did write of a small cat that happened to join them on their pilgrimage. However it happened, many believe that the cat was Sister Gertrude serving out her penance in this cursed form. Instead of hunting for mice and rodents, she would hunt for the girls. When the Ursulines arrived in New Orleans, they were made aware of the vampire maidens. Almost intuitively, the cat would leave at night and return with each of the maidens one by one. One of the requirements for the Ursulines to even come to the colony was that there must be a covenant built on the land for them to work in, and built it was. Once completed, the sisters held the maidens captive on the 3rd floor. The nuns fed the maidens blood of the ill and attempted to teach them scripture in order to reclaim any humanity that might be left in them. The covenant was eventually rebuilt in its current location in 1952. That's when the maidens were transferred to the attic, where they remain today. The legend says that if you happen to be walking around the Covenant late at night and you see the shutters of the attic open, that it's better if you turn around. Turn around and walk back home for where you came from. You don't want to know what waits in front of you in the cover of night. Another legend says that every now and again a small cat can be seen circling the grounds. This is said to be Sister Gertrude still serving her penance as both prisoner and warden. Centuries worth of anger, sadness, and lost humanity trapped inside that attic to this very day. This was only the first recorded legend of vampires residing within the city, nor would this be the last. The next follows Jacques Saint-Germain. He was a French aristocrat who arrived in the early 1900s to New Orleans. He was said to be an incredibly charming fellow, a ladies' man of sorts. He loved to party. You would see him freaking around the calming watering holes of the nightlife. He himself was also an excellent host. He would throw these extravagant parties that would be the talk of the town, almost like a Great Gatsby of New Orleans. Fine wine, lovely music, and wonderful food. However, many of his guests noticed that Germain would never eat at his own festivities. They always assumed that he must have gorged himself before or after in order to maintain his pristine image. Nevertheless, he entranced anyone that would listen with stories of his travels, stories of different countries and of different times as if he was there to witness them. He maintained the fact that he had access to these personal accounts due to his family lineage. He claimed to be a direct descendant of Comte de Saint-Germain, a French nobleman who served under King Louis XV. It was said that he had a portrait of his descendant in his home, and visitors would note the resemblance was uncanny, a little too uncanny. The nobleman, forever frozen in his portrait at what many believed to be the age of 40, looked exactly like Saint-Germain, who seemed to be frozen at the same age. They started to say that he was never a descendant, but was the man in the portrait. It was never said seriously, of course, only as a passing joke. One night, everything changed. In the late hours of the night, a woman fell from Germain's balcony in a fit of hysteria. She wasn't pushed, she jumped. She screamed bloody murder and claimed that Saint-Germain bit her neck and that she was only able to escape due to a loud banging coming from the door. The police arrived but believed the woman was being insane. You see, Germain was well respected in the community, so the police told him to not come by in this late hour for questioning and to just come by in the morning. The woman was taken to Charity Hospital where she passed away. To everyone's surprise, Germain did not arrive at the police station that morning. He seemed to have completely vanished without a trace. The police broke into his residence and everything had been left behind. During their investigation, the police surveyed the second floor where they found wine bottles that had been previously opened but closed once again. Upon pouring the contents of the bottles, the police found a twisted concoction of fine wine and human blood. Saint-Germain was never found again. His residence was believed to be this one at 1041 Royal Street. It's a private residence now, but many say that if you happen to come upon the residence at night and look up at the windows, you may see someone staring back with a glass of wine in their hand. Last but certainly not least came the legend of the Carter brothers. Picture this: 1930s New Orleans. A few years into the Great Depression, and everyone was struggling. Jobs were few and far between, and hunger was plentiful. In an apartment on 800 Royale Street lived two brothers named John and Wayne Carter. To anyone passing by, they looked like regular folk. They went to work, they clocked in, they clocked out, then they came back home. That was until one night where one young girl came running down the street, seemingly running for her life. She had escaped from that very apartment. When the police finally had the chance to catch up to her, they noticed her wrists. Her wrists were cut to oblivion. Not enough to kill her, but just enough to make her bleed. The police rushed to the apartment from which she escaped and found a scene straight out of a horror movie. They found 4 victims, all tied down to chairs, barely alive. Their wrists were cut the exact same way that the girl's was, and all around them, over a dozen bodies drained of their blood, every single drop. The Carter brothers were found to be kidnapping people to feed on them every night. It was just another part of their routine. They clocked in, they clocked out, and fed off the blood of these poor, unfortunate souls. When John and Wayne walked through the door, they were arrested on the spot. They didn't even try to deny it. The legend says that they confessed immediately on the spot. They even begged the police to be executed. They said over and over again that we are vampires, and that they had a bloodlust that they couldn't control. That same bloodlust was eating them from the inside out. One of the old vampire legends was that a vampire needed to feed on your blood for 7 days in order for you to become one. In an almost cruel twist of fate, one of their victims seemed to have turned. They went on to murder over 32 other people, draining the blood from each one of their victims. The Carters were executed for their crimes against humanity, or so everyone thought. Not long after their execution, someone went to go check on their graves and found their tombs empty, bodies gone without a trace, like they just got up and walked away. To this day, people still say that they're out there walking the French Quarter. A story that circulates is that one of the old owners of the apartment building looked up and saw 2 men standing on the 3rd floor balcony. On the balcony, the men were whispering to each other in the cover of darkness. Once they realized that they had been spotted, both of the men leapt off the balcony and vanished into the quarter like they had never been there. These legends have been a part of the folklore of New Orleans, helping inspire a young writer from the area known as Anne Rice. Anne Rice authored a series of novels known as The Vampire Chronicles, the more notable entry in the series being Interview with a Vampire. The book itself is set in New Orleans and follows a vampire telling a reporter their 200-year-long history. The book was released to mixed reviews but eventually found success, so much so that it was later adapted to a feature-length film by the same name. You can actually watch my So You Don't Have to review the movie on my other pages where I consume content so you don't have to. Shameless self-promo aside, the movie itself was also a fairly successful endeavor. On a budget of $60 million, the movie was able to gross $223 million over its theatrical run. It currently stands at a 66 and an 86 critic and audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. It's even arguable that Anne Rice is the grandmother of the modern Western vampire, but that's another story for another video. The commercial success of both the movie and the book cemented New Orleans as the vampire capital of the United States. This, coupled alongside the scenery being both beautifully haunting and beautifully antique, it was an obvious choice from the beginning. The influx of tourism from the newly appointed title still fuels the economy to this day. It's not uncommon to see vampire shops, apothecaries, and paranormal stores scattered around the Big Easy. The city of New Orleans accepted the title so proudly that even a subculture of self-proclaimed vampires developed and is still thriving today. As I was researching this, I found an organization under the acronym NOVA, otherwise known as the New Orleans Vampire Association. This seems to be a group that attempts to unite the different houses of vampires within New Orleans to form a powerful and surprisingly charitable group. I found a paper that actually talks about both the group and subculture of vampire more in depth. I highly recommend you check it out for yourself. The link for this paper will be found in the description. To summarize shortly, Browning, the author of the paper, found that many of these self-identifying vampires fell under two categories: the sanguinarians and the energy vampires. The energy vampire is a self-explanatory one, as they feed off either psychic or emotional energy. The sanguinarians are more akin to the vampires of popular media that sustain themselves with either animal or human blood. Before any of you freak out, the author assured that the sanguinarians source their blood from ethical and legal sources. They only did so with willing donors and regularly did checkups to see if there were any complications from their lifestyle, which there rarely were. Another thing of note is that the author got to interview Balthazar Ashanteson, otherwise known as Czar. Czar himself is a very well-respected elder within the vampire community. He is also one of the founders of Nova. I hope that as the channel grows and I'm able to see some success with it, I'll be able to interview this man in the future, so fingers crossed. New Orleans is steeped in occult happenings due to the cultural influences that shaped it. Hoodoo, voodoo, and other spiritual practices were brought alongside enslaved people and survived despite the atrocities that they had to face. They have blossomed and evolved into the beautiful landscape that New Orleans continues to permeate to this very day. I've never been, but I can't wait to visit, and I hope you feel the exact same way. That's it for today's video. I appreciate each and every one of you that took the time to watch it. Make sure to subscribe, and I hope to see you again next time. Peace.